Welcome to the Biz Bros podcast. My name's Kyle Nelson. I got my co-host here, Eli Libby, and we got a pretty cool guest, pretty special guest today. We're really, excited and stoked to talk about his passion and how he turned it into an income and how he built an audience on YouTube. That is Mr. Sid Masand. He is the owner of Rock and Roll True Stories on YouTube, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how he got started and hopefully give us some really good tips on how anybody can build a YouTube channel about what they love. So welcome, Sid. What's up, man?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy, happy to be here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well,
so
cool.
have you, kind of get started talking about yourself? Have you always been kind of an entrepreneur at heart, getting started on YouTube, once you get it going, it's a full-time thing, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Like
how did you kind of get started with that? Where's your upbringings and where you're at today?
Sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents immigrated here in the 70s, and I'm 34 years old. So I had no inkling of being an entrepreneur when I started. Really what happened was I was sold this dream of like, you go to school, you get a good job, get a degree, and then you live life and you have a family and that's it. And I graduated in 2009, which was the first graduating class of the Great Recession then, or the financial collapse. And there was like no jobs at that time. It's not as bad as it is today, but I started working I went to school for engineering, and I worked most of my career as a project manager, which I loved because you work on these cool infrastructure projects, you work with technical specialists, you deal with the public, you're kind of like a jack of all trades. And it wasn't until 2 years into my career that a lot of my coworkers were getting promoted over me. Like I felt like I'm a really good project manager. I'm always on top of stuff. Things go really well in my projects, but I soon learned the game that it's not about what you know, but it's who you know.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Which I think it is. And I also had the bad luck that every time I applied for a job, there would be someone who had like 5 years more experience who applied for the same job. And it's like, you can't compete with that.
Nope.
So it wasn't, so that's when I started to be like, okay, maybe I got to start having a side hustle.
Right.
And I met my wife around that time, and she comes from a family of entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And that kind of piqued my interest. Like, oh, the idea of working for yourself. I never thought about that before. And she's very entrepreneurial. She has her own business too. And I first started out as a dating coach, actually, because I met my wife online.
Okay.
And I was a decent writer. Like, I think I worked with a dating coach too, like before that time. And I knew that most people didn't know how to do online dating properly. Like it can be really easy if you know what you're doing. So I would write profiles for guys and for women, and I'd have seminars, and I made some money doing that. But it was just like, I got to the point where I was hearing a lot of people's problems, and it gets draining after a while.
Sure. I'm sure. Pretty toxic, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Like, I was dealing with people who were like in the 40, 50, once or twice divorced. They had a lot of emotional baggage, and that's not something fun to deal with. And then I turned my attention to YouTube because I saw like people were having success on there.
Right.
It took me like 4 years or 5 years to find my niche. Like, I went through like, I had one of my first channels was like a rock. I was really into video games, so I was really into Rock Band and Guitar Hero. So that was like my first YouTube channel, just about like rhythm games.
Nice. Yeah.
And it grew a little bit, but it was too niche.
Okay.
Right.
And then my second channel was a Guns N' Roses like fan page, where I would tell stories about the band and like talk about the latest news.
Okay.
And that grew to about 51,000, 52,000 subs. Like, it was getting bigger. And then I kind of plateaued, and I said, well, talking about one band all the time probably isn't realistic. Maybe I should just do like a rock and roll channel and tell stories.
Right.
That's kind of when morphed into Rock and Roll True Stories. But while all this stuff was going on, in my job, like, they had this massive restructuring. So like, the group I was working with was great, but a lot of people started like moving on. They got fired, and they made all these changes, and it created an enormous amount of anxiety in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like that I never had. Like, I wasn't sleeping at night. I wasn't eating properly. I wasn't taking care of myself. I go into work exhausted and fearful for my job. And that was the time I was like, okay, I'm going full in on YouTube. Like, I'm going to just try to have freedom in my life. I didn't want other people to control my destiny. And that was the moment that like went off, and I'm going to go full in on YouTube.
Wow.
It's cool to see that what you're doing really came out of just like pure passion.
Absolutely.
Like,
oh yeah.
You saw an opportunity, and then you realize, oh, like, this is actually working. What I have right now is starting to plateau. Like, Let's create something that has no ceiling.
Exactly.
And you just went for it.
And there's a platform that is growing
It's
that
huge,
can fit
man.
that niche. That is really cool. We preach passion all day long in this podcast within our own businesses. And it's really cool to see this come to fruition for you. So that is really cool. I'm excited.
So what are some of the what are some of the key things that you realize, growing a YouTube channel?
Yeah.
I mean, you got over you have almost 250,000 subs now, that's insane.
It's crazy. Like when I started doing it, the whole thing started as like the fact that I wasn't getting promoted in my professional life, that it would help me make a little bit of money to make up for the fact that I wasn't getting promoted.
Yep.
And then it just blew up. Like the month before my daughter was born in early 2019, people started liking it, and my production quality sucked at the beginning. But what I learned is you really first and foremost got to find a good niche.
Yeah.
Like people look at YouTube and they think there's too many people doing it and I can't find my own niche. But I mean, I found it in 2019, which was like long after YouTube blew up.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really good to do your research. Ask yourself, what are you passionate about? We come back to passion, because you're going to be living and breathing that every day.
Yeah.
And you got to be comfortable talking about it. And I do get sick of rock and roll sometimes. Like I don't want to work on it, but I mean, I couldn't think of anything else. And look at what your competition's doing. Like how many people are in that niche and space, and what are they doing good? And what are they not? What are some things they can improve on? And that's kind of like where you can slide in and do that.
Absolutely. So what are some I know every YouTuber, they don't go out and tell everybody, their secret sauce and how they're getting promoted or not promoted, but how they're getting their voice out on YouTube. But what are some basic things? Because we have a lot of business owners that are trying to build their own brand that listen here. And YouTube, obviously, it's like you said, if you can find the niche, you're golden, but it's also pretty saturated if you don't find it.
Yeah.
Outside of finding that niche though, like what are some tips for people to like really, that everyone's familiar with YouTube, but like getting started on YouTube, I don't think a lot of people are familiar with. And that's why so many people fail, because they don't understand it's a whole different game when you actually are doing YouTube.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for people to kind of get started and what they need to think about?
Yeah, like I think the first thing, and I use it still, is like keyword research. And that's probably the same if you have a website or a blog. You kind of see what people are searching for. You can see the competition, if it's high or low. I think the second thing too is consistency. You don't have to be putting out videos every week. You don't have to be even every day, but people know what to expect. Like I'm doing 3 videos a week on my channel and people know to expect that.
Yeah.
And I think the third thing is really building a good foundation with your audience. I think we do a lot of things on Rock and Roll True Stories that no other YouTubers do. And I learned that from my professional life. I dealt a lot with the public on infrastructure projects, and most of the time people weren't happy. Yeah. But I learned that people want to be listened to, whether they agree with you or not. And one of the things we do is our audience dictates a lot of our content that we put out. So we have like a Google sheet that people could submit requests and ideas. And I literally have like 400 ideas, and I have a spreadsheet. I check it every day, and every day there's new requests. And I don't have to worry about putting out content. Like, what am I going to put out this week? Right.
I've never heard of that.
That's really cool. I think, go ahead.
What's cool is a lot of YouTubers, it's like, they're not like transparent and like down to earth with everybody. Like you're literally connecting with your listeners and your viewers, and like, that's cool. There's
a couple other things we do too. And like this, I want to give a shout out to my dad, because like he was the first engineer. He was an engineer too. And he's the only engineer I worked with who I actually respected, in the sense, like there's a couple engineers I work with who really impressed me, but he had people skills that I've never seen of anybody. And engineers are not known for having people skills. And he taught me, no matter how big you get in life, you should always be down to earth.
Right.
So like I learned to talk to everybody I see in my day, whether it's like the Starbucks barista, whether it's the person who I used to see in the parkade when I used to go to an office before COVID. I would know the names of everybody. They would see me and they light up, not because I'm a special person, but because I actually talk to them. So I reply to my comments as much as I can. And then we also do a fun game on our channel called Weekly Clues. So I'll tease what's coming this week, and I'll put little clues, like maybe I'll put a video with like the blurred image of the band, and then people have to guess what it is. And having that kind of engagement that most YouTubers don't do, I think that creates a really strong community.
You're very strategic.
Community.
And you have community. It's like, you don't hear that. I mean, we talked to a lot of YouTubers that have like brands and stuff like on YouTube, they vlog or they do their videos about tips and stuff, but I don't feel like a lot of people are strategic. They're just like, I mean, like like Gary V, he preaches just get started, just start putting stuff out there. But
regardless of the quality.
But
And he's
when
right.
it's strategic though, I feel like that's when you'll actually start to see. I'm assuming when you started getting strategic after a while, you started seeing the growth.
Yeah, it wasn't immediate. Like when I started, I did exactly what Gary V said, is like, just put it out there and see what the response is. If you watch some of my really early videos, they're awful. I used to live in a different place, and I would record my audio in like our living room, which was like an echo chamber. And then I learned, you can go record in your closet, and it's a great recording studio. Yeah, exactly. And then I worked with a YouTube coach, and he gave me some other tips about community, and then my quality improved. I started hiring staff to help me out too. So over time, I've seen my organic growth, like with subscribers every month, go up and up, because I think the quality's gotten better, and we've really engaged the community. And plus we do giveaways every now and then too, for like when we hit certain milestones and whatnot.
Nice.
That's very cool.
So what do you feel like was the main tipping point? When you're like, I figured you were, I always talk over you. I'm sorry.
Yep. That's okay.
What was like the main tipping point when you were getting started, and like all of a sudden you saw the growth? Like, what was it that did YouTube just pick up your stuff all of a sudden and the algorithm liked you? Were you doing something a different way? Did it come to a realization of what, I don't know, like what was it that you felt?
I feel like when I look at my stats, I don't promote the channel a whole lot. Like I don't go post, like I post on some subreddits, which are related. But I found a lot of my stuff comes from YouTube recommendations. Like, you're watching a video and you see like a video on the right-hand side. That's where a lot of our views come from. It's not from people searching necessarily. And then I also see a lot of our content is shareable. So people post it on Facebook. I've had people reach out to me to do interviews. They're like, hey, I saw your video on like, we did the band Living Color like ages ago. And they said, I saw your video on a Living Color Facebook group. And I was like, I didn't even put it there. And so it finds its way somehow, and people will post it. But the YouTube algorithm has been really good, and we've really upped our research too. Like I think we don't just scratch the surface, we go really below the surface. Like we find old articles from like 1993 about that specific band, and that gives you a lot of background that you wouldn't get reading like Loudwire or any of these other, not putting those sites down, but I mean, like if you just read the 5-minute, I'm such a nerd. I get so excited when I find like a Billboard magazine from 1994 or Spin magazine from that time.
That's pretty cool.
About that band, which, I don't think most people go that deep on YouTube sometimes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. What I like about from what I can see from the
We're checking out your YouTube page as we're talking to you. That's why we keep looking at the computer.
But what I can see from just looking at the surface here is it's almost like you can watch a documentary on a band in 7 to 10 minutes, which I think is really cool. That's also part of the social media platform of YouTube, is digestible content, a little bit longer form than other platforms, but I think you've done it super well here. And
thank you.
I haven't had a chance to listen to too many of them, but I do know that there is deep insight into each of these bands and these different, I think it's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think for me too, like, I don't try to give my opinion so much on the stories. I kind of think of myself, I hate that word YouTube influencer. You hear that term a lot. I don't like the term. I feel like I'm more of like a conveyance for like telling a story, and then people can make a judgment for themselves in terms of what side they want to choose. But I try to like get all angles, because when you watch the media landscape today, you don't get both sides. You get whatever your echo chamber is. So I don't try to take an opinion one way or the other, unless it's against censorship or something. With rock music, which I'm pretty passionate about. But and going into the later part of the year, we're doing 7 to 10 minutes, but I've already got videos that are 16 minutes. I want to do 40-minute videos.
Very cool. Yep.
And really take the documentaries of rock and roll stuff to like a whole new level that we haven't seen. That's what I want to do. Whether I get there mentally and have the time to do it, that's another story. But
So we were looking at some of these videos, and like you got some that have over 1 million views.
Yeah. It's crazy. I would have never.
So are those just like it? I would imagine they build up over time. Do some of them you post like it just hits and it's like boom, or is it like random, like all of a sudden
it's a mixture. Like some of them just have really strong, some of them start really strong, then they taper off and like they don't grow from there. Others, it builds over time. Like one I did was about Johnny Cash covering the 9 Inch Nails song Hurt.
Okay.
Which I thought, okay, maybe 20,000 people see that. And then like it keeps growing every month. People keep finding it. Some stuff, it's like it's stagnant, and then all of a sudden there'll be like a huge jump.
Yeah.
And then like I did one on Gigi Allen, like a long time ago, and it just like stagnant, and all of a sudden like the last month it's like exploded, and it could be because something that's in the news.
Right. I would
That's what I
imagine
was gonna say,
trending,
Yeah.
trending
Yeah,
topic.
it sometimes is like that. Like, you put stuff up a year ago and all of a sudden it's trending again and then it gets blows up. So it's like a mixture of everything. It can be one of those three instances. Yeah.
In terms, I want to kind of swing it back real quick to passion because we do talk about it a lot. What was the spark for rock and roll? Is it something? Did you play an instrument growing up?
That's a great question, actually.
That's a good question. Yeah, I wish I would have taken up music much earlier. Like the only music I'd exposed to going to like Catholic school was like the recorder and like choir, which both of which I was told was never good enough. I was never good enough at. But I have a brother who's 7 years older, so I was a product of whatever he was listening to. So it was like a lot of grunge music from Seattle and the Northwest. And then, which I, Soundgarden and Nirvana and Pearl Jam, but also like he was really into Guns N' Roses, which is like my favorite band of all time. Yeah. And then also, they started getting into rap and hip hop, and then he moved away, and I kind of lost touch with rock music for a while. And it wasn't until Rock Band and Guitar Hero came out in 2007, or at least Rock Band did. And I started playing that game like crazy when I was in university.
Yeah.
And I started discovering all these bands like I didn't know about, like Deep Purple and
you said Living Color.
Living Color.
That was the song on Guitar Hero that sparked my interest in that band.
Oh, really?
Shredding on that song.
Even bands like the Eagles, Mountain.
A lot of.
I discovered all this.
I was expert mode on Dragon Force. Just saying.
Oh yeah, right.
Allow Dragon through the fire. I was through the flames and fire. I haven't heard that song in a long time.
Yeah,
I haven't either.
Easy mode. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So I got really into that, and then I was also a huge Howard Stern fan. So I used to have all these like classic rock guys, and like I remember Slash came on around that time, and I was like, Guns N' Roses, whatever happened to those guys? I started going on YouTube and listening to all this music, and it kind of just like shot me back to being a kid again and listening to that stuff. And that's when the passion grew, like playing Rock Band, getting into real drums. Like I started playing drums and trying to learn guitar now, and then I was like, well, that's the only thing I really care about these days, other than my family, of course. Was rock and roll, and I just loved the attitude of it. It was like very rebellious, do it your own way.
Right.
That was kind of like what I was looking for. Like I still have my day job, but I feel like the corporate life, like it's almost like the cards are stacked against you. You have to work 30 years for someone else, have their permission to retire, and they one decision of whether they hire you or not can change your entire future. And to me, it was like a finger to them, not to my job, but to like the system of corporate life, which I resented at that point.
Wow.
Sounds very rock and roll.
It does. Very rock and roll.
Yeah. And my attitude towards, it's funny, before COVID, I used to dress very differently. Before I started Rock and Roll True Stories, wear a suit and tie to work every day.
Yeah.
And then once like Rock and Roll True Stories took off, it was like leather jackets.
That's
cool. You're
because you can finally be who you want to be, though.
Exactly.
Like, you don't have to.
And the coolest part is the people I work with, like, you can have a side gig as long as it's not like a conflict of interest. But like, I don't tell people I do Rock and Roll True Stories because I like having that. That thing that's kind of cool onto the side, right?
I love that.
Absolutely. So as we wrap it up, what are some of your, I'm just curious, like what are some of your favorite videos that you've created, like you really dove into and you felt like you created a really good piece for?
Yeah, compelling story.
It's funny, some of my favorite videos, like they don't do the best. I'm like, oh, this is gonna do great, and it does terrible. One of my favorite stories I ever did was how Megadeth kind of like revolutionized the internet. I think it's the main one on my main page. They were like the first band that did a major band who did like a website, and they had this cool website that was on for their album at the time, and it became like a living legend. Like millions of people visited it. The record label didn't want to take it down because it was still so popular years later. I'm just thinking what else. We're doing a lot of like in-depth band stories these days, that some of which I haven't released. But we also talk about a lot of like lesser known bands. Like we're talking about like, Caius. We're going to be doing a whole story on. We've got, just look at my calendar because I got them all written down on there. We're talking about like Gin Blossoms, Ween. We got some cool stuff about like Pantera. Those early days when they were a glam metal band, like teased hair and all that stuff before Phil Anselmo joined. And yeah, just some. I'm a big Alice in Chains fan, so we do a lot of stuff on them too. I've got a lot of people asking me to do Black Flag, but we got a great Henry Rollins story coming up. But another one that I really enjoyed was that Johnny Cash one. Like I love, because I feel like, even if I'm not familiar with the artist, I learn a lot about them. And I've done a couple stories on Johnny Cash, and we did like one about his haunted house and about how he almost got boycotted in the South because of people thought he was married. He was in an interracial marriage back in the 60s.
Wow.
So there's some great stories, but really my fans, like my subscribers, like they give me most of the content I do is like their ideas.
Cool. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Saw Megadeth in high school.
Yeah.
Good show.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of Megadeth coming in the future. Yeah.
Nice. Well,
cool, man. You know, I really appreciate seeing some insight from, you know, a consumer of YouTube. And like, you know, we have a YouTube channel, but it's nothing crazy. I mean, we just post our stuff and we're in the beginning of it, but it's cool to see some insight of someone that's actively growing, like on a very, like, it looks like your subs are like growing like crazy right now. And it's cool to see like what you're doing. And really it comes down to consistency, having a good strategy and plan and finding that niche.
Exactly.
I feel like it's what we kind of came from with this.
Yeah, like that's pretty much it. And you know, also having a bit of luck too, like having the algorithm pick up your videos. Like I would have never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be doing this, but I'm like, yeah, I'm really fortunate.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks, Sid. So if you want to let everybody know where they can find you and your channel, or any other message real quick to wrap this up, go ahead.
Yeah. We're just search YouTube, Rock and Roll True Stories. And then we have like a cool Google form on the description box where you can submit ideas and submit as many ideas as you want. Because I look at them like every couple times a week to see what fans are requesting. Yeah.
Awesome, Sid.
In there.
Well, let's keep in touch. I hope like in a year from now we can do another episode and follow up and see that you're like,
absolutely.
I got 3 million subs. I got 5 million. That'd be cool, man.
That'd be cool.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Bye. Have a good one. See ya.